I was arranging my husband's funeral when my daughter accused me of hiding money. Weeks later, I found her sleeping in the car, sharing food with the dogs. I reached for her hand. Then she whispered something that changed everything. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." The funeral home smelled like lilies and regret. I stood there at 60 years old, feeling every single one of those years weighing down on my shoulders as I stared at the mahogany casket that held my husband of 35 years. Robert looked peaceful in death, more peaceful than he had ever looked in life, and I wondered if that should tell me something about the man I had married. The funeral director, a soft-spoken man with kind eyes, was explaining the final arrangements to me when Riley burst through the heavy oak doors. My daughter had always been dramatic, but there was something different about her entrance this time. Her usually perfect blonde hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her dress wrinkled as if she had slept in it. "Mom, we need to talk. Now." Her voice cut through the hushed atmosphere like a knife through silk. I turned to face my only child, my heart already sinking. Riley had inherited her father's intensity, but where Robert kept his emotions bottled up until they exploded, Riley wore hers like armor. At 32, she was beautiful and fierce, but standing there in that funeral home, she looked like a wounded animal ready to attack. "Riley, sweetheart, can this wait? I'm trying to finalize the arrangements for your father's service tomorrow." She let out a bitter laugh that echoed off the walls. "Oh, I'm sure you are, making sure everything looks perfect on the outside, just like always." The funeral director cleared his throat uncomfortably and excused himself, leaving us alone with Robert's body and 32 years of unspoken resentment. "What is that supposed to mean?" I asked, though part of me already knew this conversation wasn't going to end well. Riley stepped closer, her green eyes blazing with an anger I had seen building for years but never understood. "It means I know about the money, Mom. I know you've been hiding it." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What money? Riley, what are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me." Her voice was rising now, and I was grateful the funeral home was empty except for us. "Dad's been dead for 3 days, and you're already talking to lawyers about the estate. Mrs. Henderson next door saw the attorney leaving our house yesterday." I felt my chest tighten. "That was just about the will, honey." "Standard procedure when someone dies." "Standard procedure?" Riley's laugh was harsh and broken. "Mom, I'm 32 years old, and I'm drowning in student loans. I've been asking for help for months, and you always said there wasn't any extra money. But somehow, 3 days after Dad dies, you can afford the most expensive funeral package they offer?" I looked around the elaborately decorated room, taking in the mahogany casket with brass handles, the imported flowers, the premium service package that had indeed cost nearly $15,000. When had I become the kind of person who thought money could somehow make death more dignified? "Your father deserved a proper goodbye," I said quietly, but even to my own ears it sounded weak. "What about what I deserve?" Riley's voice cracked, and for a moment, I saw the little girl who used to climb into my lap when thunderstorms scared her. "I've been struggling for years, Mom. Years. And every time I asked for help, you made me feel guilty for even asking. You made me believe we were barely getting by." "We were barely getting by," I insisted, but the words felt like lies in my mouth. Riley shook her head, tears streaming down her face now. "I don't believe you anymore. I can't believe you anymore. Dad's insurance policy alone was worth $50,000. I saw the paperwork on the kitchen counter. My hands started shaking. How did she know about the life insurance? I had been so careful to keep the financial details private, just like Robert had always insisted. "Riley, you don't understand the whole situation." "Then explain it to me," she shouted. "Explain to me why you let me eat ramen noodles for dinner 6 nights a week while you were sitting on enough money to help me get my life together. Explain to me why you watched me stress myself sick over money while you were planning $15,000 funerals." I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. How could I explain 20 years of walking on eggshells? How could I tell her about the nights I lay awake calculating every penny, making sure Robert never suspected I was setting aside small amounts when I could. How could I describe the fear that lived in my chest every time I thought about having financial independence? "I was protecting you," I whispered, but it sounded hollow even to me. "Protecting me?" Riley's voice was incredulous. "By lying to me? By letting me struggle when you could have helped? That's not protection, Mom. That's selfishness." The word hit me like a slap. Selfish. Is that what she thought I was? All those years of working 2 jobs to build a small emergency fund without Robert knowing. All those nights of planning and hoping for a future where we could both be free from his control. Was that selfish? "You don't know what you're talking about," I said, my own anger finally surfacing. "You don't know what our marriage was like. You don't know what I sacrificed." "Then tell me," Riley screamed. "For once in your life, just tell me the truth." But I couldn't. The truth was too big, too complicated, too dangerous. Even with Robert dead, the habits of secrecy were too deeply ingrained. Riley stared at me for a long moment, waiting for an explanation that would never come. When she realized I wasn't going to speak, something in her face hardened. "I can't do this anymore," she said quietly. "I can't keep pretending we have a normal mother-daughter relationship when you treat me like I'm some kind of stranger you barely tolerate." "That's not true, Riley. You're my daughter. I love you." "Love?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "If this is love, then I don't want it anymore." She turned and walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble floor with finality. "Riley, wait, please. We can talk about this after the funeral." She paused at the doorway without turning around. "No, Mom, I won't be at the funeral. And I won't be coming around anymore. You want to keep your secrets? Fine, keep them. But don't expect me to keep pretending everything is okay." The heavy door closed behind her with a soft thud that seemed to echo through my entire body. I stood there alone with Robert's corpse, surrounded by expensive flowers and the remnants of a relationship I had somehow managed to destroy at the worst possible moment. For 35 years, I had kept secrets to protect the people I loved. Now, it seemed like those same secrets were going to cost me the only family I had left. 3 weeks had passed since Robert's funeral. 3 weeks since Riley had walked out of my life with words that still echoed in my mind every morning when I woke up in our empty house. The service had been beautiful and well attended, but Riley's absence was a gaping wound that no amount of sympathy casseroles from the neighbors could heal. I had called her 17 times in those first few days. Each call went straight to voicemail, and each voicemail I left sounded more desperate than the last. After the first week, I stopped calling and started driving by her apartment instead, but her car was never there. Her landlord, Mrs. Chen, told me she hadn't seen Riley in over a week and was starting to worry about the rent. That should have been my first clue that something was seriously wrong. On this particular Tuesday morning, I was driving back from the grocery store, taking the long way home because the house felt too quiet and too full of memories I wasn't ready to face. I had started doing that lately, finding excuses to stay away from the place where Robert and I had built 35 years of what I now realized was more of a careful performance than a marriage. I was stopped at a red light when I saw the beat-up Honda Civic parked behind the old Denny's restaurant. The car was familiar, but it took me a moment to realize why. It was Riley's car, but it looked different somehow. Dirtier. The back windows were covered with what looked like blankets, and there were bags piled up in the back seat. My heart started pounding as I pulled into the parking lot. As I got closer, I could see someone moving around inside the car, and my stomach dropped when I realized it was my daughter. Riley was sitting in the driver's seat with the door open, and she was sharing what looked like a gas station sandwich with 2 dogs. Not her dogs. I had never seen these animals before. They were both mutts, skinny and scruffy, and they were eating like they hadn't seen food in days. I parked 20 feet away and just watched for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. My daughter, my successful, independent daughter who had graduated from college with honors and landed a good job at the marketing firm, was living in her car. When I got out and started walking toward her, Riley looked up and saw me. The expression on her face wasn't anger this time. It was shame, raw and devastating, mixed with a kind of exhaustion that seemed to go bone deep. "Mom," she said quietly, not moving from her position. "What are you doing here?" I could ask you the same thing. I tried to keep my voice gentle, but I could hear the shock bleeding through. "Riley, what's going on? Why are you sleeping in your car?" She let out a laugh that had no humor in it whatsoever. "Well, it turns out that when you can't make rent for 2 months straight, landlords tend to get upset." 2 months? I stepped closer, and that's when I really saw her. Riley had always been thin, but now she looked gaunt. Her clothes hung loose on her frame, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. "Honey, why didn't you call me?" "And say what?" Her voice was bitter. "Hi, Mom. Remember how you made me feel like garbage for asking for help? Well, I need help again, but this time I'm literally homeless." One of the dogs, a golden retriever mix with ribs showing through his fur, nudged my hand with his nose. I automatically reached down to pet him, and he leaned into my touch like he was starving for affection as much as food. "Where did these dogs come from?" I asked. Riley's face softened as she looked at the animals. "I found Buddy here about a week ago. Someone had dumped him behind the grocery store. Princess showed up 2 days later. I think she was looking for food in the dumpster. She broke off another piece of her sandwich and gave it to the smaller dog. I couldn't just leave them there, you know? They needed someone to take care of them." I watched my daughter share her food with 2 stray dogs while she was homeless herself, and something cracked open in my chest. This was Riley at her core, the girl who brought home every injured bird and lost kitten, who cried at sad commercials and gave her lunch money to classmates who forgot theirs. "Riley, you can't live like this. Come home with me. We'll figure something out." She shook her head firmly. "I can't do that, Mom. I can't go back to walking on eggshells and pretending everything is fine when it's not." "What do you mean, walking on eggshells?" For a moment, something flickered across her face. A memory, maybe, or a realization. Then she looked away. "You wouldn't understand." I sat down on the curb next to her car, not caring that my good pants were getting dirty. "Try me." Riley was quiet for a long time, absently petting Buddy's head while she seemed to be wrestling with some internal decision. Finally, she looked at me with eyes that seemed older than her 32 years. "Do you remember when I was 8 and I spilled grape juice on Dad's newspaper?" The memory hit me like a physical blow. Of course I remembered. Robert had exploded, screaming at Riley until she ran to her room in tears. Then he had turned on me, demanding to know why I couldn't control our daughter better, why I let her eat in the living room, why I was raising such a careless child. "I remember," I said quietly. "You came to my room later and told me it was okay, that accidents happen, but you also told me I needed to be more careful around Dad, remember? You said he had a lot of stress at work and sometimes little things upset him more than they should." I felt sick. "Riley, I was just trying to—" "I know what you were trying to do," she interrupted. "You were trying to protect me. But what you actually did was teach me that Dad's anger was more important than my feelings. That I needed to shrink myself to keep him comfortable." The words hit me harder than any accusation about money ever could. "That's not what I meant," I whispered. "Maybe not. But that's what I learned. And I learned it so well that I've spent my entire adult life trying to make myself small enough that nobody gets upset with me. Do you know how exhausting that is?" I did know. I knew exactly how exhausting it was, because I had been doing the same thing for 35 years. Riley reached into the back seat and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "I got fired 3 months ago," she said, handing it to me. "My boss said I wasn't assertive enough, that I let clients walk all over me and never stood up for the company's interests." I unfolded the paper and read the termination letter, my heart sinking with every word. Poor performance due to inability to advocate for company positions. Failure to meet sales targets due to reluctance to pressure clients. 3 months? I looked at her. "You've been struggling for 3 months and you didn't tell me?" "I was ashamed," she said simply. "And I was angry. I kept thinking about what you said at the funeral home, about protecting me. I couldn't figure out what you were protecting me from." But I knew it wasn't poverty. She was right. I hadn't been protecting her from poverty. I had been protecting her from something much worse, but in doing so, I had taught her all the wrong lessons about what she was worth and what she deserved. "Riley," I started, but she held up her hand. "I need to tell you something," she said, and her voice was different now. Quieter. More serious. Something I've known for a long time, but never said out loud. She reached over and took my hand, and I could feel how thin her fingers had gotten. "I know about the bruises, Mom." The world seemed to stop spinning. My mouth went dry and my heart started racing so fast I thought I might pass out right there on the curb behind a Denny's restaurant. "What bruises?" I managed to whisper, but we both knew it was pointless to deny it. Riley's eyes filled with tears. "I know Dad hurt you. I've always known." The words hung in the air between us like a confession that had been waiting 30 years to be spoken. I stared at my daughter, this woman I had tried so hard to protect, and realized that all my careful secrets had been transparent to the person who mattered most. "You knew?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. Riley nodded, tears streaming down her face now. "Not at first. When I was little, I thought the bruises on your arms were from gardening or cleaning. You always had an explanation ready. But as I got older, I started noticing patterns." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, and I could see that little 8-year-old girl who used to crawl into my lap when she had bad dreams. The bruises always appeared after Dad had one of his bad days. After he came home angry about work, or when bills were tight, or when you did something that upset him. And you would wear long sleeves for weeks afterward, even in summer. I felt like I was drowning. All those years of careful makeup application, of strategic clothing choices, of perfectly rehearsed explanations for why I couldn't go swimming at the neighborhood pool, or wear the sleeveless dress Riley had picked out for me for her high school graduation. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" I asked. "Because I was scared," she said simply. "I was scared that if I said something, it would get worse for you. And I was scared that if I said something, you might leave, and then who would take care of me?" The honesty in her voice broke something inside me. Here was the truth I had spent decades trying to hide, and my daughter had been carrying the weight of it alone since she was a child. "Riley, I never wanted you to know. I never wanted you to see that. But I did see it, Mom. I saw all of it. I saw the way you flinched when Dad raised his voice. I saw how you always had dinner ready exactly when he wanted it, how you never contradicted him in front of other people, how you made yourself smaller and smaller until sometimes I felt like you might just disappear completely." Buddy the dog sensed the tension and moved closer to Riley, resting his head on her knee. She absently stroked his fur while she continued talking. "Do you remember my 16th birthday party?" I did remember. Riley had wanted to invite 20 kids from school, and Robert had said it was too expensive and too much trouble. I had spent weeks convincing him to let her have a small party with just 8 friends. "You worked so hard to make that party perfect," Riley continued. "You made the cake from scratch. You decorated the whole backyard. You bought me that dress I wanted, even though I knew money was tight. And then Dad got upset because one of my friends accidentally knocked over a plant on the patio." The memory came flooding back with painful clarity. Robert had started yelling about irresponsible teenagers and disrespectful children, and I had quickly ushered all the kids inside while I stayed outside to calm him down and clean up the mess. "I watched from the kitchen window," Riley said quietly. "I saw him grab your arm. I saw you wince. And I saw you smile and pretend everything was fine when you came back inside, even though I could see the red marks on your wrist." Riley. "That night, after everyone went home and Dad went to bed, I found you crying in the laundry room. You told me you were just tired, but I knew better. I knew you were crying because he had hurt you, and I knew it was somehow connected to my party, to my happiness." She took a shaky breath. "That's when I started to understand that my joy came at the cost of your pain. That every time I wanted something, every time I was happy or loud or just normal, it put you in danger." The realization hit me like a truck. "Is that why you stopped asking for things? Why you became so quiet in high school?" Riley nodded. "I thought if I could be perfect, if I could need less and want less and take up less space, maybe he would stop hurting you. I thought if I could just be good enough, quiet enough, small enough, you would be safe. I reached out and took her hand, not caring that mine was shaking. Oh, sweetheart, that was never your responsibility. You were a child. But it felt like my responsibility, she said. Every time you covered for him, every time you made excuses for his behavior, it reinforced the idea that somehow it was our job to manage his emotions. That if we could just be better daughters and wives, he would stop being angry. The truth of her words was devastating. In trying to protect Riley from the reality of her father's violence, I had taught her that women were responsible for men's anger. I had modeled a life of walking on eggshells and calling it love. Is that why you're living in your car? I asked. Because you learned to make yourself small? Riley let out a bitter laugh. Partly. When I lost my job, my first instinct was to figure out how to handle it alone. The idea of asking for help, of taking up space in someone else's life, felt impossible. Even asking my own mother felt like too much. But you asked me for help before, I protested, with your student loans, with money for your apartment deposit. And every time I asked, I felt like a failure, she said, because you had taught me that good daughters don't create problems for their families. Good daughters figure things out on their own. I thought about all the times Riley had come to me for help over the years, and how I had responded. I had helped when I could, but I had also made it clear that money was tight, that every dollar mattered, that her requests were a burden even when I was willing to bear it. I was so focused on hiding the money from your father that I made you feel guilty for needing it, I realized. Why did you have to hide it from him? Riley asked. It was your money too, wasn't it? This was the conversation I had been dreading for 35 years. How do you explain to your daughter that her father controlled every aspect of your financial life? How do you tell her that you had to lie about grocery prices to skim a few extra dollars here and there? How do you describe the terror of knowing that if he found your secret savings account, the punishment would be severe? Your father controlled all the money, I said finally. He gave me a household allowance each week, and I had to account for every penny. If I spent more than he thought I should, or if I couldn't explain where every dollar went, he would. I trailed off. He would hurt you, Riley finished. I nodded. The money you thought I was hiding? It was my grocery money. For 20 years I told your father that groceries cost more than they actually did. And I saved the difference. $5 here, $10 there. I kept it in a savings account he didn't know about. 20 years, Riley repeated. You saved grocery money for 20 years? I was planning to leave, I admitted for the first time out loud. When you graduated high school, I was going to take you and leave. I had saved almost $8,000 by then, enough for a security deposit on an apartment and a few months of expenses while I found a job. Riley's eyes widened. What happened? Why didn't you leave? The memory was still painful, even after all these years. You got into college, that good school in California that you wanted so badly, and the scholarship didn't cover everything. You needed $12,000 for the first year. Oh, Mom. Riley's voice was small. I used my escape money to pay for your education, I said. I told your father I had been saving household money for your college fund, which wasn't technically a lie. He was so proud that I had managed to save money from the grocery budget that he didn't even get angry. But then you were trapped again. I nodded. I started over, saving $5 and $10 at a time, planning for the future. But by the time I had saved enough to leave again, you had graduated and moved away, and I realized I didn't know how to live without someone to protect. I didn't know who I was if I wasn't your mother or his wife. Riley was crying openly now, and so was I. All these years of secrets and lies and careful protection, and the person I was trying to protect had been carrying the weight of the truth alone. The money I've been saving since you left for college, I continued. It's not much, but it's mine. For the first time in my adult life, I have money that belongs to me. And when your father died, I didn't know what to do with that freedom. Is that why you spent so much on the funeral? Riley asked. I thought about it. Maybe. Maybe I was trying to prove to myself that I could spend money without asking permission. Or maybe I was just so used to hiding money that I didn't know how to be open about having it. Riley reached into her car and pulled out a water bottle, offering it to the dogs before taking a sip herself. "There's something else I need to tell you," she said. My heart clenched. After everything we had just shared, what else could there be? "I'm pregnant," she whispered. The words hit me like lightning. Pregnant? I stared at my daughter, trying to process this new revelation on top of everything else we had just shared. Riley nodded, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "About 3 months along. That's actually part of why I lost my job. I was having terrible morning sickness, and I kept missing work or arriving late. My boss wasn't exactly understanding about it." 3 months, I repeated, doing the math in my head. "That means you got pregnant right around the time your father got sick." "Yeah." Riley's voice was barely audible. "It's been a lot to handle." I looked at my daughter, homeless, jobless, sharing food with stray dogs, and carrying my grandchild. The weight of her situation suddenly felt overwhelming. "Who's the father?" I asked gently. Riley's face hardened. "His name is Marcus. We were together for about a year, but when I told him about the pregnancy, he made it very clear that he wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility." "Did he hurt you?" The question came out more sharply than I intended, but I couldn't help myself. After everything we had just discussed about patterns and cycles, I needed to know. Riley looked surprised by the directness of my question. "Not physically, no. But Mom, when I told him I was pregnant, the way he looked at me." She shivered. It was like I had suddenly become this huge burden that he needed to get rid of as quickly as possible. "What did he say?" "He told me it was my problem to figure out. He said I was trying to trap him, that if I was smart I would take care of it before it became a bigger issue." Riley's voice was bitter. Then he packed his stuff and moved out of our apartment that same night. I felt a familiar rage building in my chest. The same protective fury I had felt any time someone hurt my daughter, but had learned to swallow down during my marriage. That's when you couldn't make rent, I realized. Right. Marcus had been paying half, and suddenly I was on my own with full rent, no job prospects because I was too sick to interview properly, and a baby coming whether I was ready or not. She scratched behind Princess's ears absently. "I tried to make it work for as long as I could, but by the time Dad died, I was already 2 months behind on everything." "Riley, why didn't you tell me any of this at the funeral home?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Because I was angry and hurt, and I blamed you for teaching me that I wasn't supposed to need help. And honestly, I was terrified that you would judge me the same way Marcus did." "Judge you for being pregnant?" "Judge me for letting myself get into this situation, for choosing the wrong man, for not being more careful, for getting pregnant when I wasn't financially stable." Riley wiped her eyes. "I had already lost my job and my home and the father of my baby. I couldn't handle losing your respect, too." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, a woman who had spent decades hiding an abusive marriage, and my daughter was afraid I would judge her for getting pregnant by the wrong man. "You could never lose my respect," I said firmly. "Never. You're stronger than I ever was." "I don't feel strong," Riley admitted. "I feel like I'm drowning." I looked around at her makeshift camp behind the restaurant, the car packed with belongings, the 2 dogs who had become her family, the way she was rationing food and water like someone who didn't know when the next meal would come. "How long have you been living like this?" I asked. 2 weeks in the car. Before that, I stayed with a friend for a few days, but her roommate complained, so I had to leave." Riley shrugged like it was no big deal, but I could see the exhaustion in every line of her body. "And the dogs? I couldn't leave them. Look at them, Mom. They're just babies who needed someone to care about them." She looked at me with eyes that were so much like my own. I know it's crazy to take on more responsibility when I can barely take care of myself, but I couldn't walk away from something that needed me. That was my daughter, the girl who had always been drawn to wounded things, who couldn't pass a homeless person without giving them her lunch money, who brought home every stray animal she found. Even in her darkest moment, she was thinking about others who had it worse. "They're not crazy," I said. "They're exactly what you needed. Someone to take care of, someone who depends on you. It gives you a reason to keep going." Riley looked surprised that I understood. "Yeah, exactly." "I did the same thing," I admitted. "I stayed in my marriage partly because I couldn't abandon you to your father's anger. Taking care of you gave me a purpose, even when I felt like I was disappearing." "But I grew up and moved away," Riley said quietly. "And you were still stuck." "I was stuck because I was scared. Scared of being alone. Scared of starting over. Scared of admitting that I had wasted 35 years of my life." I reached over and petted Buddy, who had wandered over to investigate me. "But you're not me, Riley. You don't have to repeat my mistakes." "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath. "I mean that money I've been saving for 25 years. It's not just grocery money anymore. After your father died, I found out about his life insurance policy. $50,000, just like you said. Plus his pension, which will pay me $1,200 a month for the rest of my life. And the house is paid off." Riley stared at me. "So you really do have money?" "I have enough money to help my daughter and my grandchild start over," I said firmly. "I have enough money to make sure you never have to choose between rent and food again. And I have enough money to make sure this baby grows up in a home where they never have to walk on eggshells." "Mom, I can't take your money. That's your security, your independence." "Riley, listen to me." I turned to face her fully. "For 35 years, I saved money so that someday I could escape. I dreamed about having enough financial freedom to leave, to start over, to build a life where I felt safe. But you know what I realized when your father died?" She shook her head. "I realized that freedom isn't about having money in the bank. It's about having people in your life who love you unconditionally, who don't punish you for taking up space, who don't make you earn affection by being perfect." I reached for her hand. "You and this baby, you're my freedom. You're what I was saving for all along. I just didn't know it." Riley started crying again, but this time it seemed like relief rather than despair. "I'm scared, Mom," she whispered. "I'm scared I don't know how to be a good mother. What if I mess up, what if I teach my baby all the wrong things like you accidentally taught me?" "Then we'll learn together," I said. "We'll figure out how to break the cycle, how to raise a child who knows they're loved without conditions, who doesn't have to earn their place in the world by being small and quiet and perfect." "You really want to help me?" "I want to do more than help you," I said. "I want to build a life with you and this baby. I want us to be the family we never got to be when you were growing up." Riley looked at the two dogs, then at her car packed with everything she owned, then back at me. "What about Marcus? What if he decides he wants to be involved later?" The question sent a chill through me. "Has he tried to contact you since he left?" "No. But what if he changes his mind? What if he tries to take the baby?" I thought about Robert, about the way he had controlled every aspect of our lives through fear and manipulation. I thought about the years I had spent tiptoeing around his moods, trying to predict and prevent his anger. "Then we'll deal with it," I said firmly. "Together. You're not alone anymore, Riley. You don't have to handle this by yourself." "Are you sure?" Riley's voice was small. "Because once I move in with you, once we start building this life together, I don't think I'll be strong enough to do it alone again if things don't work out." I understood what she was asking. She was asking me to promise not to abandon her the way Marcus had, the way her father had emotionally abandoned both of us for years. She was asking me to choose her, fully and completely, the way I had never been able to choose myself. "I'm sure," I said. "We're going to figure this out together. All of us." I gestured to the dogs, who had settled down between us like they belonged there. The whole crazy family. For the first time in weeks, Riley smiled. A real smile that reached her eyes and reminded me of the little girl who used to dance around the kitchen while I cooked dinner. "Okay," she said, "let's go home." Moving Riley back home wasn't as simple as I had imagined it would be. The first week was filled with an awkward dance of two women who loved each other, but didn't really know how to live together as adults. Riley had spent 14 years building her independence, and I had spent the last 4 years learning how to exist without constantly managing someone else's emotions. The dogs helped. Buddy and Princess gave us something neutral to focus on while we figured out the bigger things. We set up a corner of the living room as their space, and I found myself enjoying their presence more than I had expected. They were grateful for everything: fresh water, regular meals, a warm place to sleep. Their simple contentment was a stark contrast to the complex emotions Riley and I were navigating. Riley was in her first trimester, which meant she spent most mornings either sleeping in or throwing up. Sometimes both. I found myself falling back into old patterns, tiptoeing around the house early in the morning, keeping the coffee brewing quiet, making sure the dogs didn't bark and wake her up. It was Tuesday morning of the second week when Riley caught me doing it. "Mom, why are you being so quiet?" she asked, appearing in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, hair sticking up at odd angles. I looked up from where I was carefully, silently unloading the dishwasher. "I didn't want to wake you up. You need your rest." Riley stared at me for a moment, then walked over and started pulling dishes from the dishwasher with normal, everyday sounds. Plates clinking, silverware rattling. "You don't have to sneak around your own house," she said. "I'm not Dad. I'm not going to get angry at you for making noise in the morning." The words hit me harder than they should have. She was right, of course. I was treating her the way I had learned to treat Robert, carefully, quietly, always anticipating a negative reaction. "I'm sorry," I said. "It's just habit, I guess." "I know, but we need to talk about it because I'm doing it too." Riley pulled out a coffee mug and filled it with water for tea. Her stomach couldn't handle coffee anymore. "Yesterday I asked if it was okay to take a shower at 10 a.m. in my own home. Who asks permission to take a shower at 10 in the morning?" I realized she was right. The day before, she had practically apologized for needing to use the bathroom while I was cooking dinner. We were both walking on eggshells, but this time we were doing it with each other. "We learned some really unhealthy patterns," I said. "Yeah, we did. And now we have to unlearn them before the baby comes." Riley sat down at the kitchen table, cradling her tea. "I don't want my child to grow up thinking they have to ask permission to exist in their own space." The mention of the baby reminded me of something that had been weighing on my mind. "Riley, have you thought about what you want to do if Marcus tries to contact you?" Her face immediately tensed. "I've been trying not to think about it." "But you should think about it. We should have a plan." Riley was quiet for a moment, staring into her tea. "He doesn't even know where I'm living now. My lease was up, and I never gave him this address. But he could find out, through mutual friends, social media, public records if he really wanted to." "Why are you bringing this up?" Riley's voice had an edge to it that reminded me uncomfortably of her father. I took a breath and tried to approach it differently. "Because when I was married to your father, I spent so much energy trying to avoid problems that I never prepared for them. When bad things happened, I was always caught off guard because I had been hoping they wouldn't happen instead of planning for what to do if they did." Riley looked at me with new understanding. "You think Marcus might come back. I think men who abandon pregnant women sometimes change their minds when they realize there are consequences to their actions, or when they decide they want to control the situation after all." The possibility hung in the air between us like a storm cloud. "What kind of consequences?" Riley asked. "Well, for one thing, he's legally responsible for child support whether he wants to be involved or not. If you file for it, the state will go after him for payments. I haven't thought about child support. I just assumed I'd be on my own." "You don't have to be on your own anymore," I reminded her. "But you also don't have to let him off the hook for his responsibilities." Riley stood up and started pacing the kitchen. "I don't want his money if it means he has a right to be in the baby's life. Unfortunately, those things aren't always connected. He might have to pay child support whether he has visitation rights or not, and he might be able to demand visitation rights whether he pays support or not." "That's terrifying," Riley said quietly. "It is, but it's also manageable if we're prepared for it." I had spent the previous week researching family law while Riley slept, reading about custody arrangements and father's rights and protective orders. I wanted to be ready this time, instead of just hoping for the best. "What do you think we should do?" Riley asked. "I think we should talk to a lawyer. Get advice about your options before anything happens." Riley stopped pacing and looked at me. "That costs money." "I have money," I reminded her. "This is exactly what it's for." "But Mom, you've already spent so much. You paid off my credit cards. You're covering all the grocery bills. You bought supplies for the dogs." It was true. In the 2 weeks since Riley had moved back home, I had spent nearly $3,000 on immediate needs. Credit card debt, medical bills, prenatal vitamins, food for humans and dogs, basic necessities that Riley had been doing without. "Riley, I have $57,000 in savings, plus the life insurance money. I'm getting $1,200 a month from your father's pension, and the house is paid off. We're not going to run out of money anytime soon." "$57,000? Riley's eyes widened. "I thought you said you had been saving grocery money." "I had been saving grocery money for 25 years. $5 to $10 at a time adds up." Riley sat back down heavily. "Mom, that's incredible, and also really depressing when I think about what you had to go through to save it." "Don't think about what I had to go through. Think about what we can do with it now." Riley nodded slowly. "Okay, let's call a lawyer." That afternoon, we had our first appointment with Sarah Chen, a family law attorney who specialized in domestic relations. Her office was warm and comfortable, with soft lighting and chairs that actually felt supportive rather than intimidating. "So you're concerned about the biological father potentially asserting rights to the child?" Sarah asked, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "Yes," Riley said. "He made it very clear that he wanted nothing to do with the pregnancy, but I'm worried he might change his mind later. Has he made any threats or shown any signs of controlling behavior?" Riley and I exchanged glances. "Not exactly threats," Riley said slowly. "But when I told him about the pregnancy, his reaction was intense. He accused me of trying to trap him, said I was being manipulative." "And he moved out immediately," I added. Sarah nodded. "Unfortunately, that's not uncommon. Men who feel trapped by unplanned pregnancies sometimes lash out at their partners. The question is whether his behavior crosses the line into harassment or abuse." "What would that look like?" I asked. "Repeated unwanted contact, threats about taking the baby away, attempts to control where you live or work, financial manipulation." Sarah looked at both of us. "Has he tried to contact you since he left?" "No," Riley said. "Complete radio silence for almost 4 months now. That's actually a good sign. It suggests he meant what he said about not wanting involvement." Sarah made another note. "However, you should know that in this state, biological fathers have rights that can be difficult to terminate completely." "What kind of rights?" Riley's voice was tight. "Visitation, primarily. Even if he doesn't pay child support, even if he's been absent during the pregnancy, he can petition the court for access to the child." I felt my protective instincts flare. Even if he abandoned her when she was pregnant and homeless? Even then. The courts generally believe that children benefit from having relationships with both biological parents unless there's evidence of abuse or neglect. Riley looked like she might be sick. So he could disappear for 2 years and then show up demanding to see the baby? It's possible. But there are things we can do to protect you and establish boundaries. Sarah leaned forward. "First, I'd recommend documenting everything. Every interaction you had with him, especially around the time he left. Text messages, emails, witnesses who saw his reaction to the pregnancy news." "I have some text messages," Riley said quietly. "Good. Save everything. Don't delete anything, even if it's painful to read." "What else?" I asked. "If he does try to contact you, don't ignore it completely, but don't engage beyond what's necessary. Document every attempt at contact. If he becomes threatening or harassing, we can file for a protective order. And if he tries to take the baby? He can't just take the baby," Sarah said firmly. "Without a court order establishing custody or visitation rights, removing a child from the primary parent is kidnapping. If he tries anything like that, you call the police immediately." Riley was gripping her teacup so tightly her knuckles were white. This is so much more complicated than I thought it would be. I know it's overwhelming, Sarah said gently, but the fact that you're thinking about these things now, before the baby is born, puts you in a much better position than many women in similar situations. What do you mean? I asked. You have time to prepare, you have family support, you have financial resources to pay for legal representation if you need it, and most importantly, you're not in crisis mode trying to figure this out after something bad has already happened. She was right. For the first time in my life, I was planning ahead instead of just reacting to crises. Riley was learning to do the same thing. One more thing, Sarah said as we prepared to leave. I'd recommend that Riley start seeing a counselor who specializes in pregnancy and relationship trauma. Not because anything is wrong with her, but because having professional support during this transition will be helpful, and it also creates documentation of her mental health and stability. Documentation for what? Riley asked. If Marcus ever does try to challenge your fitness as a parent, having a record of proactive mental health care works in your favor. It shows that you take your well-being seriously and you're committed to being the best parent you can be. As we drove home, Riley was quiet for a long time. I'm scared, Mom, she finally said. I know, but we're going to handle this together. And we're going to be prepared this time. Promise me something, Riley said as we pulled into our driveway. What? Promise me that if Marcus does come back, you won't try to handle it alone. Don't try to protect me by dealing with him yourself. The request surprised me. What do you mean? I mean, I know you, Mom. I know your instinct is to put yourself between me and anything that might hurt me. But if Marcus shows up, we deal with him together, as a team. I thought about it. She was right about my instincts, but she was also right that handling things alone hadn't worked out well for me in the past. I promise, I said. We're a team now. That night, as I listened to Riley and the dog settling in for sleep, I realized something had shifted between us. We weren't just mother and daughter anymore. We were partners in building something new, something better than either of us had ever had before. 8 months later, I was holding my granddaughter for the first time. Emma Rose weighed 6 pounds and 4 ounces, and she had Riley's determined chin and my stubborn cowlick. She was perfect in the way that only babies can be, completely herself from the very first moment, demanding nothing but love and attention and the basic necessities of life. Riley had been in labor for 14 hours, and I had been by her side for every minute of it. We had practiced breathing exercises together, walked the hospital corridors when the contractions got intense, and celebrated each stage of progress like the team we had become. She's so small, Riley whispered, exhausted, but glowing as she watched me cradle Emma. But she feels so real, you know? Like she's been waiting her whole life to be here. That's because she has been, I said, gently stroking Emma's soft cheek. She's been waiting for exactly this moment, with exactly these people, in exactly this family. It had been a good 8 months. Riley and I had fallen into a rhythm that worked for both of us. She had found a new job doing freelance graphic design, which allowed her to work from home and set her own schedule. I had started volunteering at the local animal shelter twice a week, which gave me purpose and gave Riley space to be an adult in her own right. We had both started therapy, separately and together. Dr. Martinez had helped us understand the patterns we had learned in our family of origin, and more importantly, how to build new patterns that would serve Emma better. The dogs had thrived. Buddy was now a healthy 65 pounds of pure golden retriever joy, and Princess had revealed herself to be part terrier, part comedian. They had become Emma's first guardians, sensing her arrival weeks before labor started and positioning themselves as protective sentries around the house. But the biggest change had been in me. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't walking on eggshells. I wasn't scanning every room for potential threats. I wasn't calculating the emotional cost of every decision before I made it. I was just living. Mom, Riley said sleepily, do you think she looks like him at all? I knew she meant Marcus. It was the first time she had mentioned him since Emma's birth. I looked carefully at my granddaughter's tiny features. I think she looks like herself. And like you. And maybe a little like my mother around the eyes. Riley smiled. Good answer. Have you thought about whether you want to put his name on the birth certificate? I asked gently. We had discussed this extensively with Sarah Chen over the past few months. Riley had the option to list Marcus as the father, or to leave that section blank. Each choice came with different legal implications. I think I want to leave it blank for now, Riley said. If he ever decides he wants to be involved, he can petition for a paternity test. But I don't want to give him automatic rights to her when he's never even asked how the pregnancy was going. It was a thoughtful decision, and one that gave us more control over the situation if Marcus ever did resurface. What if he sees the birth announcement in the paper? Riley asked. What if someone tells him? Then we'll deal with it, I said firmly. Together. As if summoned by our conversation, Riley's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and I saw her face change. What is it? I asked. It's from Marcus, she said quietly, holding up the phone so I could see. The message was brief. Heard you had a baby. We need to talk. Riley stared at the screen, and I could see the fear creeping back into her eyes. For a moment, she looked like that scared girl I had found living in her car 8 months ago. Hey, I said softly, shifting Emma so I could reach over and take Riley's hand. Remember what we practiced? What's the first thing we do? Riley took a deep breath. Document everything. Right. Screenshot that message and send it to Sarah. What's the second thing? Don't respond right away. Think about what I want to say, if anything. Good. And the third thing? Remember that I'm not alone this time. Riley took another deep breath, and I watched her pull herself together. This was what 8 months of therapy and preparation had given us. Tools to handle crisis without falling apart. What do you think I should say? She asked. What do you want to say? Riley was quiet for a moment, looking at Emma sleeping peacefully in my arms. I want to tell him that he lost the right to make demands when he walked away. I want to tell him that we don't need to talk about anything, because there is no we. Then tell him that. But what if he gets angry? What if he tries to cause problems? Then we'll handle that too. Riley, you're not the same person you were 8 months ago. You're not scared and alone and homeless. You're a mother now, with a home and a support system and legal representation. He can't hurt you the way he did before. Riley nodded slowly, then typed out a response. If you want to discuss anything regarding Emma, contact my attorney, Sarah Chen at Chen & Associates. Otherwise, please don't contact me again. She showed me the message before sending it. It was perfect, direct, clear, and professional. Send it, I said. She hit send, then immediately turned off her phone. How do you feel? I asked. Scared, she said honestly. But also powerful? Like I actually have choices this time. You do have choices, and you made a good one. The next few days were tense as we waited to see if Marcus would respond. Sarah advised us to be prepared for anything. He might contact the law office, he might try to reach Riley directly again, or he might disappear back into silence. What actually happened surprised all of us. 3 days after Riley's message, Sarah called to tell us that Marcus had indeed contacted her office. But instead of demanding visitation rights or threatening legal action, he had asked about signing away his parental rights. He wants to terminate his parental rights voluntarily. Riley repeated when I relayed the conversation. According to Sarah, yes. He told her that he's getting married to someone else and doesn't want any complications from his past relationships. Riley was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. What does that mean exactly? She asked. It means he would have no legal relationship to Emma at all. No rights, but also no responsibilities. No visitation, but also no child support obligations. And I would be Emma's only legal parent? Yes. You could make all decisions about her upbringing, her medical care, her education, everything, without having to consult with him or worry about him interfering. Riley looked at Emma, who was sleeping in her bassinet nearby. Would I be able to put someone else's name on the birth certificate later? If I ever got married and wanted my husband to adopt her? Yes. If his rights are terminated, adoption would be much simpler. What's the catch? Riley asked. There has to be a catch. The only catch is that you would be giving up any claim to child support from him. If you ever needed financial help in the future, you couldn't go after him for it. Riley laughed. I never wanted his money anyway. I just wanted him to leave us alone. Then it sounds like he's offering to give you exactly what you want. 2 weeks later, we sat in Sarah's office while Marcus signed the papers that would legally end his relationship to Emma. He looked older than I remembered from the few times I had met him. And there was something desperate about the way he kept checking his watch and glancing toward the door. He barely looked at Riley, and he didn't ask a single question about Emma. When Sarah explained that this decision was permanent and irreversible, he just nodded and kept signing papers. That's it? Riley asked when he left. That's it, Sarah confirmed. Once the judge signs off on this, it's like he never existed in Emma's life, legally speaking. Riley was quiet on the drive home. Are you okay? I asked. I think so. It's weird, though. For so long, I was scared he would try to take her away, and now it's like he never wanted her at all. How does that make you feel? Relieved, mostly, but also sad for Emma, I guess. She'll never know her biological father, and maybe someday she'll have questions about that. When she's old enough to ask questions, you'll tell her the truth, that you wanted her so much you were willing to do it alone, and that she was loved completely from the moment you knew she existed, and that she has the best grandmother in the world, Riley added with a smile. And 2 dogs who think she's the most important person on earth. We drove the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, and I realized that this was what peace felt like. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of tools to handle whatever came our way. That evening, as I watched Riley feeding Emma while Buddy and Princess maintained their protective vigil nearby, I thought about the woman I had been a year ago. The woman who was so afraid of taking up space that she had made herself invisible. The woman who had hoarded grocery money for 25 years because she couldn't imagine any other path to freedom. That woman would never have believed that freedom could look like this. A house full of noise and laughter and dog hair and baby equipment. She would never have imagined that the money she saved could be used not for escape, but for building something better in the same place where she had once felt trapped. Mom, Riley said quietly, I have something I want to tell you. I looked up from where I was folding tiny pink onesies. I'm going to change Emma's last name. Not to Marcus's name, obviously, but not to mine either. What do you mean? I want to give her your maiden name, Henderson. I want her to be Emma Rose Henderson. I felt tears spring to my eyes. Riley, you don't have to do that. I want to. I want her to have a name that represents strength and survival and starting over. I want her to have a name that connects her to the woman who taught me that it's never too late to choose yourself. I looked at my granddaughter, this tiny person who would grow up knowing she was wanted and loved and protected. She would never have to learn to make herself small. She would never have to save grocery money in secret or walk on eggshells in her own home. Emma Rose Henderson, I said, trying it out. I like the sound of that. Me too, Riley said. It sounds like the beginning of something new. Outside, it was starting to rain softly against the windows. Inside, we were warm and safe and free. The secrets that had once threatened to destroy us had become the foundation for something stronger. We had learned that sometimes the weight of the past can be transformed into the strength to build a better future. And for the first time in 60 years, I knew with absolute certainty that everything was going to be okay. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.